I'll divide this text into 5 parts of approximately 5,000 characters each. Here's the first part. At the company party, my wealthy father humiliated me. "She's just a cafeteria worker," everyone laughed. Then his secretary approached me. "Ma'am, we need your bank's approval for the emergency loans." My father turned pale. He would regret it. Someone once said, "Nobody gets abandoned by their own family." But that's a lie. I once stood trembling in pouring rain with the door locked from inside, while my mother silently drew the curtain as if I were a stranger. I once walked more than 5 miles under the 95-degree sun, with worn-out shoes and bleeding feet just because I missed the bus. I was only 12 when they called it character building. If you think I grew up in a family, I'm sorry, but it felt more like a cold boot camp. I'm Emma, and this is the story of how my parents, Richard and Nancy, taught me that love isn't guaranteed under the same roof. When I was little, I thought all families were like this, that all parents remained silent during dinner, speaking only to give orders or yell, that every mother set a timer when you cried and then said, "You have 3 minutes to be weak." That if a child wanted to be heard, they had to hold their breath until their face turned purple before anyone would notice. My father was a former soldier. My mother used to be a teacher, but after I was born, she quit her job and devoted all her energy to training me to become someone who wouldn't depend on anyone. They called me their first experiment and always said if I failed, I'd have no one to blame but myself. I still remember a winter night in Minnesota when I was just 9 years old. I forgot to take out the trash on time. A small mistake, or so I thought, but not to my father. He quietly opened the back door, dragged me outside by the hand, and said, "Stay here until you understand the value of responsibility." Then he closed the door. No coat, no shoes. It was about 34 degrees Fahrenheit. I trembled with numb hands and feet, but all I dared to do was remain silent. I stayed there for almost an hour, and when my mother finally opened the door, she simply said, "I hope next time you'll think twice before being useless." When I was 11, I overslept and missed the school bus. My mother refused to drive me, and my father mocked, "You made the mistake. You fix it." So I walked from home to school, almost 6 miles. I carried a backpack weighing nearly 20 pounds. My feet became covered in blisters, my back soaked with sweat. When I finally arrived at class, almost 2 hours late, the teacher called my mother. She simply responded, "She needs to learn not to be dependent," and hung up. When I told my friends, they thought I was lying or exaggerating. Some even said, "Your parents are just strict." But they weren't strict, they were cold. It was how they trained me, like I was a survival machine. No emotions, no love. Every day at home was a silent war. I had to learn to interpret moods. Each frown on my mother's face, every raised eyebrow from my father. Anything could be an excuse for a lesson. Forgetting to fold a blanket, spilling milk, laughing too loudly, asking a question at the wrong time. I used to dream that someday they would hug me and say, "We're sorry, Emma. You didn't deserve this." But that never happened. They never apologized. They just kept training me. Day after day, I stopped being a child. I became a training project. A doll with a serene face even when I was screaming inside. I thought I was used to everything, but I was wrong. Because the final lesson they gave me when I was 15 wasn't like anything before, and it changed my life forever. I'll never forget that day. The Florida sun was blazing as if it wanted to melt the world, and the smell of hot plastic from the car seat is still etched in my memory like an unhealed scar. I was sitting in the back seat with headphones on, half dizzy from the heat, while Richard and Nancy, my parents, argued about something completely meaningless. As usual, I didn't care. They only spoke to give orders or criticize. The rest was just background noise, loud and repetitive. The trip to visit my cousin in Tallahassee ended with a silent dinner and a sarcastic comment from my mother. I don't know why she didn't inherit any grace from the other side of the family. I didn't respond. I was used to being the perpetual disappointment. The car stopped in a small town called Crestview, near an old train station. Paint peeled from the roofs, faded signs barely visible under the scorching sun. Richard turned around with empty eyes. "Go get me a soda." I removed my headphones. "What?" Nancy turned with her lips curved in a twisted smile. "Your father is thirsty. I want a bottle of water, too. Hurry up, sweetie." I looked at them with a twinge of doubt in my chest, but still opened the door and stepped out. The heat hit my face like an open oven. I walked across the cracked platform, took out the last $10 bill from my pocket, and fed it into a vending machine that groaned as if it were dying. I grabbed the soda and water, turned around, and the car was gone. No parked cars nearby, just a vast, sun-scorched parking lot. No vehicles, no people, no sound except for the cicadas crying as if they were mourning. I stood frozen, the now useless cold soda in my hand. My heart pounded. My brain searched for some explanation. Maybe they just moved the car. Maybe they went to get gas. My phone vibrated. A message. I opened it and read just 4 lines before my entire body went cold despite the scorching heat. Let's see how long it takes you to get home alone. This is a test. Don't call Aunt Elaine. You need to learn to face the world. Don't disappoint us. I froze. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a joke. They had really left me. No luggage, no wallet, no map, no one at my side. I called back, straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Panic gripped my throat like a tightening rope. I texted back only to receive one more line. Don't mess this up. Handle it yourself. I nearly threw up. I was only 15. No driver's license, no transportation, no plan. Rage began to surge beneath the layer of fear. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just stood there, crushing the water bottle in my hand until it crumpled. Then I took a deep breath, as if I could exhale the nightmare from my chest. I checked my pockets. Some loose change, a phone with 27% battery, a wrinkled paper map stuffed in the back of my backpack, something I'd accidentally kept from last year's camping trip. I entered the station where only an old man sat behind the counter looking half asleep. Is there a bus station nearby? I asked, my voice breaking from a knot in my throat. He raised an eyebrow and looked out the window. About 2 miles to the left on the main road, but nothing comes through until tomorrow afternoon. I nodded and turned away. My feet hit the scorching pavement, my knees aching as if they would give out. But I didn't stop. I didn't let the tears fall. I didn't scream that I'd been left behind like some kind of vagrant. I did the only thing I was forbidden to do. I called Aunt Elaine, the only one in the family who had ever looked at me with genuine kindness. Emma, my God, what happened? Her startled voice came through on the second ring. They left me, I said. And for the first time in my life, my voice actually trembled. She was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then she spoke clearly. Stay where you are. I'm coming. I sat by the dusty roadside, staring at the red dirt road. At that moment, I didn't know my life had just taken a completely different path, and that I would never go back. When Aunt Elaine arrived, I was huddled under the narrow shadow of a utility pole. The hot wind sweeping across the pavement felt like a cruel reminder that I had nowhere left to go. Her old SUV pulled into the parking lot as if time itself was burning beneath the wheels. She got out before I could say anything, wrapping me in the kind of hug that made breathing difficult. My God, my poor girl. Her voice trembled, her arms clinging to me as if afraid to let go. What the hell did they do to you? I didn't answer. I had no words strong enough to describe what had happened. But I knew one thing. I was never going back. 3 days later, I stood in her small living room in Gainesville, looking at the single suitcase I owned, the one she had bought me because I had nothing else but an old backpack. I didn't cry or panic, but I felt as if a huge void had opened in my chest, and I had to fill it with something, anything, just to avoid being completely swallowed up. What do you think you'll do now? She asked, sitting beside me with a steaming cup of mint tea. I looked out the window. The sky was cloudy but not raining, like me, gray but not breaking. You know I'm not going back, right? She nodded. I won't pressure you to do anything, but if you stay here, you'll have to start from scratch. No Richard, no Nancy, no more planned choices, just you. I nodded. For the first time, I felt I had a choice, not just being thrown into a script someone else had written. Even if the road ahead was difficult, at least it was mine. I got a job at a small cafe near the University of Florida, just waiting tables, but the owner was kind and didn't look at me like I was a broken child. I worked from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., then went home and studied for my GED at night. I wanted to make up for the school years I'd lost. I wanted to go to college, not to prove anything to Richard or Nancy, but to prove to myself that I could. Aunt Elaine helped me in every way she could. She wasn't rich, but she was rich in love, something I had never really experienced before. She drove me to my exams, waited in the car all morning, bought me an SAT prep book even though it cost almost a week's worth of food for both of us. A year later, I was accepted to the University of Central Florida with a partial scholarship. The day I received my acceptance letter, I stood frozen for nearly 5 minutes. "You're about to have a new life, Emma," Aunt Elaine said, taking my hand. "And this time, you write it." 4 years later, I graduated with honors in urban development. When I walked up to receive my diploma, I didn't hear the applause. I only heard the voice in my head. The voice of a 15-year-old girl standing silently under the cracked roof of a train station, with hands trembling from being abandoned, and I whispered to myself, "You did it, Emma. You survived." Immediately after graduation, I worked for a small real estate company in Jacksonville. I started with the jobs nobody wanted: cleaning model homes, reviewing construction permits, making cold calls to skeptical clients. But I learned fast. I observed everything: how people built trust and how they destroyed it in a single meeting. 3 years later, I started my own business. I took out a small loan from a local bank, combined it with savings from years of side jobs and investments, and founded Urban Living, a simple name that carried no trace of the family I came from. I wanted a completely fresh start. The beginning was tough. At one point, I had only $3 left in my account and a project that canceled at the last minute, but I persevered. I learned to negotiate, to calculate risk, to turn abandoned land into modern housing blocks for young families. Little by little, Emma stopped being a stranger's name. I hired employees. I rehired a lawyer who had rejected me in my first year. I bought the old office building that used to belong to my first company, just to remind myself that nothing is permanent, not even the lowest starting point. At 29, Emma reached 7-figure revenues. I stood on the 12th floor balcony of our office, looking at the Orlando skyline, and smiled. I had once been left behind at an unwanted train station. Now hundreds of people called me boss, and I never forgot that feeling of being discarded because it's the reason I never stopped moving forward. But I also knew that the past never really dies. It just sleeps, waiting for the door to be knocked on. And one summer day, that knock came. It was the past, and it was coming to collect from me. 20 years after the day I was left like damaged goods, I stood in the glass-walled office of my headquarters in downtown Orlando, on the 17th floor of the building that bore the name Urban Living Headquarters, looking down at the busy streets below. Everything I had, every brick, every contract, every dream, had been built from a pain I never chose. But I survived. I lived well, and I thought the past had forever rotted in the shadows behind me, until my phone rang. A name I hadn't seen in 2 decades appeared on the screen. I stared at it. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again, and this time I answered. "Emma." My sister Victoria's voice trembled, as if it had been pulled from a dusty pile of old memories. I said nothing. "Are you okay?" she asked. I laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "After 20 years, that's the phrase you start with?" Victoria was silent for a second. Then she said, "Cutting to the chase, they're in trouble." "What?" I replied. "Emma, debts. The house was foreclosed. Mom's depressed. Dad's drinking himself to death. Dad lost his entire retirement on some stupid gambles. They need you." I gripped the phone. The metal dug into my palm. My heart didn't soften. It boiled. "I don't owe them anything, Vicky. But you don't have to forgive. Just help." I interrupted her. "Remember when I was 15? Remember the day they left me at that rundown train station with a can of soda and not a single explanation? Remember? They thought you'd come back. They didn't think at all. They never saw me as a person. I was a test, something to train. And now that they've failed, they come back as if I were a charity bank." Victoria was silent. I heard a tired sigh across the line. "I just want to keep the family together." "Family?" I almost laughed. Family ended for me the day they closed the door and left me standing in the January rain. I hung up. I thought that would be the end, but I underestimated Richard and Nancy. They didn't understand failure, only how to turn the tables. 3 days later, Jenny, my assistant, entered my office with a pale face. "Emma, you need to see this." I took the iPad from her hands. The screen was already open to Facebook. A new post from an account called Nancy Joy. "We are heartbroken parents. Our only daughter abandoned us when we needed her most. After all we sacrificed, we now face illness, poverty, and loneliness. She has forgotten her blood. She chose money over family." Below were hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. How sad. Kids today are so selfish. How can anyone abandon their elderly parents? I heard she's rich. What an ingrate. I felt sick. Not because of the lies, but because of the ease with which they made themselves out to be victims. They knew how to act. They always did. "Some clients are asking questions," Jenny whispered. "Some appointments canceled." I closed my eyes. My head throbbed like a drill. They didn't just want money. They wanted to reclaim me at any cost. I opened Instagram. My company account was tagged in a series of posts with hashtags like bad daughter, sacrificial piety, pay up. I smiled ironically. If they wanted to play this game, I wouldn't back down. I posted a black and white photo of the Crestview train station, the place where they left me when I was 15. The caption was a single line. "Not everyone who gives birth deserves to be called family." 2 minutes later, Victoria called. I didn't answer. An hour later, Nancy texted, "You've disappointed us. You owe us, Emma." I looked at the words, my blood boiling like molten steel. I replied, "No." The day you drove away from that parking lot, all debts were settled. Then I hit block. The screen went silent again. Only I knew this was just the beginning. 3 days after I posted the train station photo on Instagram, the real battle began. Every morning, I woke up to dozens of new notifications, posts, comments, direct messages. Some called me ungrateful. Others tagged me as a snake wrapped in velvet, rich, successful, but heartless. There were even videos analyzing my cold-blooded behavior based on carefully edited photos. Some TikTok influencer even made a fake video claiming to be a former classmate, saying, "Emma once boasted, 'I'll abandon my parents if they get in the way of my success.'" Media parasites began to swarm. I didn't care about strangers' gossip. But when my company's name started appearing in tags like Thatcher's Boycott Urban Living and Don't Buy from the Ingrate, I knew it had crossed the line from personal to professional. Jenny entered my office Monday morning with a face like she'd swallowed a bucket of ice. She had a stack of printed emails in her hands. "Emma, I'm sorry. Some of our partners are asking for clarification about your family situation." I clenched my fists. My family is a scar, not a line item in an investment portfolio. Jenny placed the printouts on my desk, hesitating. 3 major clients just delayed signing. One of them messaged me directly. "We don't want to be associated with someone they're calling impious." I gave a bitter laugh. So now it's about being impious. Fantastic. I stood up and walked to the window, where Orlando stretched out like a moving painting. The buildings I'd helped design, the corners I once dreamed of transforming, now it all seemed like it might crumble under a well-crafted lie and a crowd eager to point fingers. That's when my phone rang. David Newman, one of Urban Living's biggest investors. "I'll be frank. What's happening on the internet is not good for the company's image." I sighed. "What do you want me to do? Go live and cry about why I didn't send money to people who once left me at a train station?" A pause. "I'm not judging your personal life, but we're talking about customer confidence. Is there any way to alleviate this?" "No." "Then you should be prepared for the consequences." I hung up. An hour later, a new post appeared from Richard Joy, a photo of the two of them sitting in a dark, shabby room with downcast eyes. We never meant to hurt her. Everything we taught was to make her strong. And now in our old age, she turns her back as if we never existed. Over 12,000 shares. A wave of false sentimentality crashed in. If it were me, I couldn't live with that kind of guilt. How can someone be so rich, but so poor-hearted? Parents aren't perfect, but nobody deserves to be abandoned. I wanted to break the screen, but instead I opened an old folder on my computer. Photos of the train station from that day. Emails from the lawyer I contacted when I reported being abandoned. Audio files of Aunt Elaine's testimony used for temporary guardianship paperwork. I had kept everything, not out of hate, but because I knew they would come back, and now they had. That afternoon, an emergency meeting was held. I sat at the head of the table facing the PR team, 2 senior executives, and our in-house lawyer. No one spoke until Mike, our communications director, finally did. We advise against giving a public response. The more you engage, the more the media will cling to it. I shook my head. So, you think I should let them keep lying while this company's reputation bleeds out? Mike looked at me, his round eyes behind his glasses narrowing slightly. Emma, empathy isn't something earned with logic. The public is driven by emotion. I leaned back, hands clasped. Then I'll use the only thing I have, the cold, distant truth, in the same way they treated me. I pulled out a USB drive and plugged it into the laptop. On the screen appeared an audio clip from 2006. Nancy's high-pitched voice. If she can't find her way back, then she doesn't deserve to be my daughter. The boardroom fell into sepulchral silence. I'm going to make it all public. People deserve to know, but this time not through their lens. I stood up. You want psychological warfare? Then let me show you what it really looks like. That night, I opened my personal laptop and wrote a post. When I was 15, my parents left me at a train station. Not because it was a mistake, but because they wanted to see how I would manage on my own. They didn't look for me for 20 years, but when I became successful, they came back. And when I said no, they created a heartbreaking story about being abandoned. This is the first and only time I will speak publicly. I'm not ungrateful. I'm simply surviving. I hit publish. Then I sat in the dark office waiting for the second storm to arrive. I was ready. Less than an hour after the post went live, my desk phone began lighting up nonstop, as if under attack. Notifications, messages, emails, missed calls. I sat still in the dark office, illuminated only by the glow of the laptop screen, like a spotlight directed at someone who had just stepped off stage. The post wasn't a slap. It was a cold, precise dissection. Each sentence cut directly through the false narrative that Richard and Nancy had crafted for so long. I attached screenshots of old messages, the one from the day they left me at the train station. Handle it yourself. This is a lesson in maturity. I posted the audio recording of my mother mocking as she spoke on the phone, her voice clear. I don't need to raise her anymore. Let the world teach her. I included the scanned file of my temporary guardianship documents when Aunt Elaine took me in while my biological parents ignored my calls in the middle of a stormy night. I didn't curse, didn't plead. I didn't use hook words. I simply exposed the raw, unvarnished truth, and public opinion began to shift. The first comment that made me pause came from a woman named Michelle P. I believed your parents' post. I'm a mother, too. But after reading what you shared, I'm horrified. No one deserves to be treated like that. Then came others. I was left at a supermarket when I was 10 just because my mother was angry. I know that feeling. If you survive that kind of upbringing, you're the strongest person I've ever seen. You're not ungrateful. You're living proof of having survived emotional abuse. By noon the next day, my post had over 3 million views. News sites began to publish it. CEO responds with brutal truth. The truth behind the ungrateful daughter. Story that broke the internet. Woman who exposed toxic parents gets community-wide support. I walked into the office the next morning like someone returning from war. And I wasn't walking alone. Employees who once remained silent out of caution now greeted me with looks of quiet respect. Mike, the communications director, nodded slightly. I was wrong. Your response. Perfect timing. I looked around the boardroom, the same room where they had advised me to stay quiet, to endure, to wait for the storm to pass. They wanted to make me the villain in my own story, I said. Now they've lost control of the narrative. That night, Richard and Nancy responded with another video, but this time everything unraveled quickly. They sat in their living room, Richard pretending to sob while Nancy repeated rehearsed lines like a bad actor. We just wanted our daughter to understand. We sacrificed so much. But the 2-minute video got dissected frame by internet users. Inconsistent facial expressions, fake tears, even the brand new lighting fixtures in their supposedly poverty-stricken home revealed that their narrative was staged. The comments quickly turned from sympathy to anger. What a shame, using your child just to get sympathy. Not all parents deserve forgiveness. I used to dislike Emma. Now I just want to give her a hug. Early Friday morning, David Newman called again. His tone completely changed. I'd like to apologize, Emma. I should have trusted you. You don't need to apologize, I said coldly. But from now on, remember, silence also takes a side. As I hung up, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. 15 years spent building trust in my company, and a single lie had almost reduced it all to ashes. But I stood firm, and now no one could rewrite the truth. 3 days later, a reporter from The Atlantic reached out for an interview. The topic: my journey from abandonment to success, and my public stand against emotional abuse within families. I took a few seconds to think, then replied, I'm ready. But this time, we tell the story the right way. No tears, no sugarcoating. Just the truth. When I pressed send, for the first time in years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. No more fear. No more internal conflict. I had reclaimed my voice. I was going through the final blueprints for our Riverstone housing project when Jenny rushed into my office, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed by priority mail. Her voice sounded tight as a wire. Emma, you need to see this right away. I saw the sender's name clearly printed in the top left corner. Lewis and Briggs Law Offices. I'd been expecting it. I slowly opened the envelope, as if delaying what I already knew was coming. The heading was blunt, cold, bold. Official notification of lawsuit under the Filial Responsibility Statute, Section 7, Clause 11, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I froze, disgusted like never before by a legal document. My parents were suing me for financial support in their old age. Me, the daughter they'd thrown away at 15, the person they had ignored for decades. I exhaled, rage growing quietly in my chest like a fire beneath ashes. Jenny, call Andrew. I need him here in 30 minutes. Andrew Carter, my lead attorney, sat across from me with a copy of the lawsuit spread out on my desk. To be frank, Emma, he began cautiously, Florida doesn't strictly enforce filial responsibility laws. However, if they established temporary residency in Pennsylvania, or if they escalate this to a federal level, things could complicate fast. I crossed my arms, eyes fixed on the document. Complicate? They're using the legal system to chain me back to the people who discarded me like garbage. This isn't about money, it's about control. Andrew nodded slowly. They're counting on fear. Fear of litigation, fear of media exposure, fear of embarrassment, and if you pay just once, they'll have their hooks in you forever. A tight smile curled the corners of my lips. Then they chose the wrong person to threaten. That night, my phone rang, a private number. When I picked up, Nancy's voice came through, syrupy sweet, laced with subtle venom. I just want a quiet conversation, Emma. We can avoid all this trouble. Just agree to support us financially. Her words felt like blades. You have no idea how hard things have gotten. We're losing our home, our insurance. You two lost your dignity years ago, I snapped, icy calm. And now you're playing the victim, the loving mother? Silence stretched on the other side for a second. Then Nancy's tone turned sharp. If you fight this lawsuit, Emma, we'll drag everything to the press. You really want your name tied to this scandal? I laughed, a bitter sound that cut through our connection. Do it, go public. Let the whole world see exactly how parents abandon their child and come back demanding money like loan sharks. I hung up without trembling even slightly. The next day, I assembled our legal, media, and investor relations teams. In front of them lay the thorough legal response Andrew and I had prepared. Emma Lewis categorically denies any financial obligation under filial responsibility laws, citing total absence of parental care or support for over 2 decades. Attached evidence, documented abandonment, texts, medical records of trauma, and the guardianship records from Aunt Elaine. I ended the meeting decisively. They chose to fight with the law, so I'll teach them what justice really looks like. That evening, I released my next public statement, attaching the lawsuit itself. They abandoned me at 15 without support or contact, and now sue me for money, control, reputation. This is not complaint. This is caution. Emotional abuse should never become legalized obligation. The post exploded across all social platforms. Child advocacy groups, therapy networks, childhood trauma survivors all reshared my message. Media outlets, victim advocates, lawyers all backed my fight. Overnight, End Filial Abuse became the #1 trending hashtag nationwide. 3 days later, my lawyer contacted me. Their attorneys are begging for a settlement, Emma. They're feeling the public backlash. I replied with steely determination, take it to court. Because this wasn't merely a lawsuit. This was justice for that 15-year-old I'd once been, a girl abandoned at a train station long ago. For the first time, I was finally stepping forward to defend her.